Let's start off with the Lions and Niners. The Detroit Lions, obviously, very successful season no matter what happens at this point, win, lose, or draw. Obviously, a draw is not possible. This is a good win for them. Have an opportunity to make it to the Super Bowl for the first time ever and cross their name off of that list. The Niners obviously looking to get back to the Super Bowl again. We know who you want to win. That's the Detroit Lions because everyone wants the Detroit Lions to win. But what is it about the Lions that you think gives them the edge against the Niners on Sunday?
Dan Campbell. Literally Dan Campbell. The same thing that I've been saying on Stuff About Sports since he's been hired. Like, some people just have the pulse of the team, have the pulse of the city, and make you believe. Like Dan Campbell, like, you know how coaches, they like Mike Tomlin, right? They say you want to run through a wall for him. But when you see Dan Campbell, it's like you want to run through a wall for him, but you know he's going to also run through the wall with you. And you can see it. And especially, and thank God Hard Knocks exists, because like, that's like, think about, he really cares. And it's a little more than he played for the Lions or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even think it matters if he played for the Lions or not. I think he would be the exact same. Absolutely. And then the icing on the cake, and it's not just he's a really swell guy. He's actually a damn good coach, right? I mean, their rush defense is nasty. They have really good players. They brought the best out of Jared Goff, and they earned it little by little. This isn't some flash in the pan. You know, they sucked, and then they had one good year, and then they fell off. They were slowly building towards this, which leads me to believe that Dan Campbell and his coaching staff knows what they're doing.
Absolutely. I think the interesting thing about Dan Campbell is that there were some people who were hoping that the Dan Campbell experience would fail in Detroit, especially considering the way that his opening press conference started off with taking out hunks of other people and biting off kneecaps and all this other nonsense. But whether you like it or not, like, Dan Campbell is one of the better head coaches in the league, at the very least from a standpoint of like being our locker room guy. Like, there's not a lot of locker room guys at the head coaching spot across the league. This is a young team that buys what Dan Campbell is selling. And Dan Campbell is the epitome, the personification of the city of Detroit. Like, all the things all the words, all the adjectives that you would use to describe the city of Detroit, you can use those exact same words, those exact same adjectives to describe Dan Campbell, which I love. For no reason other than wanting to see something new, and for no reason other than wanting to finally get rid of all of the Kyle Shanahan praise that I think is slightly unwarranted. I want to see the Lions win this game. I want to see the Lions make it to the Super Bowl. It's odd for me to say that as a Packers fan, I'm quite sure, but I want to see the Lions go to the Super Bowl. I want to see the Lions have that success because Jared Goff deserves it, because Dan Campbell deserves it, because, quite frankly, the city of Detroit deserves it. It's been such a long time since they've had any type of, like, since they've been even close to having a good basketball team or football team. And this has been a pretty good month for Detroit, for the city, for the state of Michigan as a whole. You got Michigan winning the national championship. Could you imagine the Detroit Lions win the Super Bowl?
Oh my gosh.
The state of Michigan might just burn to the ground if the Lions win the Super Bowl. At least the city of Detroit would.
The Lions at this point, though, can't lose, right? Like, they're in the NFC championship game. Think about that. The Detroit Lions are in the NFC championship game. So even if they lose, I don't think anybody will look at it like a letdown. But all things considered, no matter how good the 49ers have been or consistent at least all year, it comes down to the fact that this actually is a bad matchup for the 49ers, right? Like, the key for them is to slow down the run game, but they have a two-headed monster. Not only that, Detroit Lions have like a top 5 run offense, and the Niners run defense isn't that good. And then other things on the offensive side of the ball, Decker and Penei Sewell, probably 2 of the top offensive tackles left in the playoffs. Yeah. So, you know, that guaranteed sack from Nick Bosa is probably not coming. And so, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I like Detroit's chances. Jared Goff has done enough for me. Like, I guess, yes, he could have one of those Jared Goff games, but he's been pretty solid all season. And the Niners secondary isn't all that great either, with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Reynolds and those guys. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about Detroit.
I am too. I think the Detroit Lions are actually going to win this game. I know that people say, oh, Jared Goff doesn't play good outside. That's fine. Again, when you have a team that's not expected to be here, when you have a team that's not expected to win, people are picking them, yes, but no one expects the Lions to win this game. You get to go out there, you get to play football freely without a care in the world of what happens. The Lions have been doing that a lot this season, and it's gotten them a lot of wins. Jared Goff, by the way, the third quarterback in NFL history to lead 2 different teams to 14 wins in a season.
Ooh.
Shout out Jared Goff for that.
Give that man his flowers.
Tom Brady, give that man his flowers. Speaking of giving men their flowers, this is the ideal matchup in the AFC. Pat Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson, right? I said at the beginning of the postseason, I thought Lamar Jackson had the most pressure. This is the one quarterback that Lamar Jackson hasn't really been able to face in a big-time situation. Yeah, he's got a win over Pat Mahomes, but it wasn't really like a meaningful game, right? The wins he has against Joe Burrow count as meaningful games because they're divisional round games. He has wins over Josh Allen. He does not have a meaningful win over Pat Mahomes. He has a chance to get that this Sunday at home in the AFC Championship. This is the first time since like 2011, I think, that the AFC Championship game is not in New England or Denver or Kansas City, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. At the very least, it's the first time in 6 years that it's not in Kansas City. Who in the AFC is punching their ticket to the Super Bowl?
So, crazy thing, I looked up that neither one of these defenses has allowed a 30-point game this season, right, between the Chiefs and the Ravens, which I found amazing. I actually went back and looked at all the scores. And to me, when I look at it, and I couldn't believe Baltimore was only a 3.5-point favorite, this is the easiest bet to make all year. You bet the Ravens because that streak is about to end. The Ravens are going to put 30 points up on the Chiefs, and they're going to beat their ass, like by at least 2 touchdowns, I think. And think about it. Look at all the Ravens have played every team that have been mostly in the playoffs all year, including the Niners, including a lot of the division winners, and they've beaten them by 25 points. The Ravens are for real, and we made this big deal, and it's double hilarious because this time last year the Ravens were acting like they didn't even want Lamar Jackson, and here they are on the brink of going to a Super Bowl. Note that a bunch of teams passed on them, didn't want to talk about signing them. And now you have this situation where, okay, we need weapons, right? And they went out and got them weapons, right? If you looked at OBJ now and you didn't know anything about him, you wouldn't have thought he was probably the best wide receiver in the league for a stretch. So, sure. And he's been okay, but he's been solid. Zay Flowers, right, can be somebody, but you wouldn't say the Ravens, the only guy they really have is Mark Andrews, and he's coming back from injury. And again, matchups matter. You're going against the Chiefs, whose only real weapon is Rice, right? Maybe Pacheco. But in terms of in the playoffs, you would say the Ravens might have the weakest weapons overall. But the problem is they have the biggest X factor, right? Like the Lions have really good receivers. The Niners have really good weapons, right? With Ayuk and Debo's going to play maybe. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey. So all the weapons are on the NFC side. AFC, you're really quarterback dependent. So do you go with the thing, the devil right? And Patrick Mahomes, 6 years, 6 AFC title games, which is it took my breath away just now. But then you have Lamar Jackson, who is doing it in ways that we've probably never seen at this level of success, to the point where like people were saying he shouldn't even be quarterback. And here he is about to bring his team to a Super Bowl. Running quarterbacks don't win Super Bowls. That might change this year. I don't know, but we'll see. So it'll be interesting to see what happens between these two teams. I mean, the Ravens have just been so overwhelmingly better than everybody else. I know it's Patrick Mahomes, and I know that you can't, I got my hopes up with the Bills game. I thought the Bills had a good chance of doing it, but if you're not going to get Mahomes and company this year, I don't know when you're going to get them, because I have a sneaky suspicion they're gonna grab one of these high-end free agents that's going to be available in this coming offseason. So if Lamar and anybody's going to do it, it's got to be this year.
So for the longest time, we sit down and we've been trying to figure out who's like the Brady Manning of this era, right? Like where do these quarterbacks all kind of shake out? And I think obviously there's no denying that Pat Mahomes is this generation's Tom Brady. He's going to go down as the greatest quarterback of this generation, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time at the rate that he's going. I think a win against a win against Patrick Mahomes on Sunday at home gets Lamar Jackson one step closer to, at the very least, being the Ben Roethlisberger of this generation. A really good quarterback who doesn't always have the fiery, the super the weapons that bounce with names who bounce off the charts, but still really reliable weapons, still really good weapons, and happens to catch Brady off every once in a while. I think that's where Pat Mahomes is, or I think that's where Lamar Jackson is headed. I want to say Lamar's going to win this game. I really, really do. Like, I really want to say that Lamar's going to win this game. But I watched watched Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs last week in Buffalo against your Bills, and it's hard. Like, I know that the Ravens are light years better than the Bills. They're light years better than the Chiefs. I know that this season, but Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. And what we saw from this team last week, especially defensively, is this really is the best defense that Pat Mahomes has had. Now, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win this game. I am picking the Ravens to win, but it's a really hard pick, right? Because the spread is so misleading, because it's going to make you think it's going to be a close game. But like you said, the Ravens have been beaten up on everybody all year long, especially the good teams, especially the playoff teams. So it's like, okay, the Ravens could blow this team out, but how many times have we seen Pat Mahomes get blown out in his career? In a playoff game at that.
Andy Reid too, as a coach.
They've been blown out one time in the Pat Mahomes era. It was against Tom Brady and the Bucs in 2020. That's the worst loss of Pat Mahomes' career. It was in the Super Bowl. That's what it's going to take almost. It's going to take an absolutely shut down, dominant performance from front to back for the Ravens to win this game. And while I think they have what it takes to do that, it's just hard to see a scenario where Pat Mahomes gets absolutely blown off the football field. So it's a tough one. I think it's going to come down to who has the ball last, and I think it's really going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes. And what we know is that the Chiefs don't make mistakes. The Ravens, despite the fact that they have been good, and despite the fact that Lamar is likely going to be the MVP this season, Lamar did turn the ball over a lot this season between interceptions and fumbles. And so that is going to be something to look out for, because this Chiefs defense is a hard-hitting defense, and they will go after the football. But I do have the Ravens winning this game by a touchdown and making it to the Super Bowl for the first time in the Lamar Jackson era, because quite frankly, Lamar Jackson has to make it to the Super Bowl this season. Like, this isn't like one of those things like where all the other teams kind of needed to do it this year because Pat Mahomes is probably going to be this is the worst team we're going to see Pat Mahomes on. This is like, if Lamar doesn't make it this season, will Lamar ever get back? Because you have Pat Mahomes in a down year with his team, right? You didn't really have to run into Joe Burrow this season because he was in and out of the lineup due to injury. Trevor Lawrence was not who we thought he was going to be because he got hurt this season. Josh Allen, you didn't have to run into the Bills, right? Justin Herbert and the Chargers might actually be a competitive football team next year. You still have to worry about C.J. Stroud next year, potentially Anthony Richardson and the Colts, depending on what they do. And Lamar and the Ravens are better than most of these teams, but the AFC is not getting any easier. Like, the only team that we know for sure can go through the gauntlet of the AFC is the Kansas City Chiefs. And so every other team has to take advantage of winning that championship this season. And the Ravens, their best shot at a championship with Lamar is this season. If they don't do it this year, they probably won't. I'm not saying they won't, but the odds of them being able to, given how the quarterback play is looking in the AFC, it'll be real tough to get back here next year if they don't do it this year.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a good point, like just within their division, right? Joe Burrow will be back, and then whatever, I mean, say what you want about this year, but the Steelers had 10 wins. They made it to the playoffs. There's a chance that they can come in with a Russell Wilson, a Kirk Cousins next year and be like that. They were missing a quarterback. They had a really good defense. Again, a 10-win team in the playoffs. Again, those two teams by themselves in just the division, never mind the Chargers who are coming, never mind the Raiders, who again may get a Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson. So that's the Steelers, that's the Raiders, that's the Bengals, and the Chargers. 4 teams that have instantly gotten better. There's no reason to think that the Texans are going to fall off. So the Texans, like you said, and Trevor Lawrence, I think, is good. We'll see what happens there. But and then the Bills are, as long as Josh Allen is on that team, they will always be competitive, right? They will always be in the mix. This year they had to overcome a lot of injuries, so I'm not banking on devastating injuries back-to-back years. I think the Bills do need to get somebody, a different defensive coordinator. I do think they need to get younger and a little bit more depth, because just the way the team has been the last couple of years, something needs to change. luckily for us, Shakir has been, somebody who can step in and be a number 2 receiver. So I don't think we'll bring Gabe Davis back, but at least we don't got to worry about replacing him
Yeah,
with any type of draft capital or any type of free agency. That's so. Yeah, the point is the Bills will get better somehow, right? Like, and then obviously the Chiefs are the Chiefs. I expect them to add a wide receiver in free agency that will kind of bring them back and kind of, pass the torch from Travis Kelce to whoever that new number one's going to be.
yeah,
Plus, with Rasheed Rice and Pacheco, who we were just talking about. So, like you said, this could be the Ravens' shot. This is, or at least their best shot, because like
yeah,
the Bills, like the Chiefs, when you have Lamar Jackson, you always have a chance. But like you were saying, we just talked about Odell Beckham, been solid, but we don't know a lot about Flowers yet, so not an exact number one. You
yeah,
just have kind of like the right parts right now that work. But again, is that going to stack up with the rest of the division next year? We'll see. But if you're the Ravens, right now is the time. And think about the story. I mean, you got Jim Harbaugh winning the national title, John Harbaugh winning the Super Bowl. I mean, damn. What a year for the Harbaugh family, and what a year, for just